not asking you to do a secret information. Oh, because SRS, they have their own power generation capability. So they're operating off of what?
All right.
If two different.
Adam's getting antsy.
Hmm?
Adam's getting antsy.
Yeah.
One from
7
Let's get
o'clock.
started with what we've
Can't
got.
fiddle with it all night.
So they get it to run.
Yeah, let's just run with the no stream.
Yep.
Line's running. KBU 139.
I'll close that. Minimize that. And then that's up there. So there you go. We're live in here at least. And David can keep fiddling with the stream. If you're in OBS, it might actually be streaming from yours, to be honest with you.
I think it is. Jeff or someone on this internet, can you talk?
Yes, I can talk. What else do you want me to say? I can say all sorts of things.
You nailed it. I think you got it covered, mate.
Yep. You're streaming, you got audio.
Delightful. So are we fully operational at this
I think
point?
so. Hell, go with it if not. I don't know.
Cool.
We'll try.
So apologies for the late start. Sorry for the last half hour sitting around doing the after hours thing.
Eating pizza and having fun.
Yeah, I will admit that Colasec is should have been planned ahead and put together ahead of time, but like all group projects, it's slammed together at the last minute under the gun because it's us.
Are you talking now?
Yeah, can you not hear us?
No, I can hear you. I was just checking.
I appreciate you, Tim. I really
I'm
do.
the man in the little box, here to heckle Adam.
It feels weird. I'm looking at you, but to look at you, I have to do that. Anyway.
I can mute him if you want to.
So can I.
I appreciate that several of you are going to mute him on my behalf.
The game is afoot.
I was looking at the website today as we were proofing and making sure we had taken down all of the purely virtual things and observed that Colasec is working on its 8th year. And that was sort of alarming to me because it doesn't feel like it's been that long. And then I remembered that we've spent the last 2 years in hibernation, but not really. And not everybody that started this journey is still with us, but I appreciate all of you for showing up and being here with us tonight as we come back together in person again. And I look forward to the rest of the year being in person and being able to do this again, because I really missed this. The online stuff was a nice placeholder if we couldn't do this, but really glad to have you guys back in the room with us. And I'm hoping you'll come and join us for the after party because they're doing smoked wings tonight at Bar None, and I plan to partake. Woohoo! So,
Tim's the MC, but he's not paying attention.
Tim is providing some guidance to some young ones, I think.
No, actually, he's not. He's actually a director at my company. But yes, I am providing him guidance on how to be a director.
Trying to get him started young.
He is young. How old are you?
31.
He's 31.
Ah,
And already a director. He killed it. He's going to be AVP in 2 years.
Nice.
directator. All right, so shall we dive into the slides and get through the news as quick as we can so Corey can knock out his presentation?
Yeah, are you emceeing or am I?
I will let you MC. I just wanted to say that bit. And now I'm going to heckle.
Okay. All right, so the big guy talking there with the beer in his hand is Mr. Adam Twitty.
I need to update that picture.
Okay.
That mask is broken. I don't even have that.
Mr. Jeff Lang, who is on the screen in the top left corner of the TV. Myself in the top right corner there. We got Don't Be a Salty Bitch in the bottom left there. She is not able to make it due to a family event, so she unfortunately did not get to come out after our hibernation.
Happy birthday, Small.
Huh?
Happy birthday, Small. Oh, I forgot. We're not recording this, so no one's ever going to see it. Oh, well.
No, we are.
Oh, we are? Oh, excellent.
We're live again.
That got resolved. Wonderful. So say again. Happy birthday, Small.
Hold on. Going back. I clicked the wrong thing. And then Mr. David Girl, who's running a lot of the equipment, along with Mr. Corey Grant, the director, as we like to call him.
Director Corey.
Director Corey. Getting connected. Obviously, we're back in person, so make sure to come back out. If you can't make it back out, be sure to join us on Google Groups or YouTube. We also have an email list if you're into that kind of thing. At this point, I am called the old graybeard because I prefer email over any other form of communication here.
You've gotten a lot better though.
And you're also living up to that old graybeard. I appreciate you for that.
Yes, I am. Yeah. Twitter, colasec _sec, colasec.org. You can email someone at info@colasec. We're on LinkedIn, of course, YouTube, Slack. Is there a Slack channel up here? Yeah, it is. Right at the very top.
Yeah, although I realize the link to it to actually get to is different. But anyway, yeah, that's it.
Just email, and we will provide the colasec Slack link. Share your brew. I saw Jeff. You were just taking a nice big swig of whiskey. What you got there?
It's just some Evan Williams bottled in bond. It's my go-to.
Very nice, Mr. Twitty. What do you have in your hand? Because I can't see it.
Citrus Rescue from New Belgium.
Ooh, I wanted to try that. I haven't tried that yet. Did you get a New Belgium variety pack for the group?
I did. Yeah, I was intending to run to Greens before the meetup started, and well, time was against me. So we the grocery store special.
Another perk of being in person is beer and food. You guys got pizza tonight?
Yeah.
So
I was very concerned that I had 4 pizzas for 7 people. Now it seems it's 4 pizzas for 9 people. So
that's a good turnout. Very nice. So Mr. Girl has gotten the Voodoo Ranger Juicy Hazy IPA. Is that all right?
You got the New Belgium?
Yeah.
The mix pack? Okay.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
Anyway.
By the way, we do take donations if you'd like to donate for beer and pizza. So it doesn't come free.
That's a change from pre-pandemic. The donation is up live on the site now, right?
Yeah. It's not on the site, but
well, we can take donations.
we can arrange.
Talk to us.
Yeah, like a what do they call it? Square.
Square transaction. Yeah.
Thing. You just go to it and you pay for them. Yeah.
Just give the director some cash, and he'll be sure to add it to the fund.
Rules.
Mental Health Hackers is one of the nonprofit organizations we like to support because our job's tough, and you need to be mentally healthy, not just physically, to make sure you're doing your job. And we have lost a colasec member in the past, particularly during this pandemic. It was really rough, but I think one of the things that's going to come out of this pandemic is that we've got a lot more focus on mental health. So, if you're not feeling well, me and Nick, my buddy here, we're just actually talking about how like November this winter, like you just get in a crappy mood. It's the weather, it's darker, it's things like that. So it's not to be overlooked in any capacity, right? It's a serious thing. So get help if you need it. In the news. So this could probably be his presentation in itself. But we have a war going on right now with Russia invading Ukraine. And there is actually quite a lot that deals with security in it. This is outside of all the other stuff going on. I'll run through a couple highlights, let anybody else kind of interject here. To me, what's really interesting is there's a lot of like information war. Like this is more of an information war. Like Ukraine's doing a really good job on the social medias, like poking at Russia and trying to get support that way. But with social media, there's also a lot of misinformation and a lot of other stuff being distributed. Prior to attacking, like physically attacking Ukraine, Russia did a DDoS on banking and sent out like text saying your ATMs can't work. Which is also, we've seen like specific malware created by the Russians for Ukraine to, a lot of it's like wiper type stuff to just wipe out data, not just destructive. So they got like specific Ukraine malware. The U.S. intelligence too has like for some reason skipped. Well, for reasons has skipped like all the bureaucratic red tape to share intelligence with the world and with Ukraine. There's actually an interesting thing I was reading about how what constitute the U.S. going to war with Russia because we're feeding Ukraine so much information about Russian movements. Right? There's a debate and interesting conversation going on around that. Hacktivism, of course, Anonymous has got to get in on this, but there's a lot of people coming to Ukraine's side around trying to disrupt some Russian infrastructure. So, and then of course, we're going to talk about this soon, is the Conti ransomware group had all of their shit leaked, which is very interesting. That again is the next slides. We'll talk about that. Then also interesting note, because why not? The Russians weren't really prepared to go into Ukraine because they lacked a lot of comms, like basic communication equipment. So there's stories of civilian phones being confiscated and used for communication. There's unencrypted channels that a lot of ham radio operators are listening in on and gathering intelligence on. So they're just from a war front standpoint, there's some interesting things there. Then there's corporation sanctions and supports. Cyber insurance is becoming a bit of a topic too. With there's usually like an act of war kind of clause called out within cyber insurance. So anybody getting ransomware, that companies might start using, especially if it's like a company based in Ukraine and they get hit or whatever. There's kind of some discussion going on that. And then a new cybersecurity bill that's around reporting if you've been breached and then also if you've paid a ransomware, reporting times on that as far as critical infrastructure goes. So there's a lot of like fallout from this invasion. Adam, looks like you have something to say.
No,
that's a long time with me talking without somebody saying something. So you all might be. Did I put everybody to sleep, or is everybody just tired of the war? Or
no, it's just a super dense topic, and I was afraid of making this the topic of the meeting just because I have kind of been glued to the coverage of it and the logistics disaster that the Russian army has been. And
I feel like that'll be the topic for the bar none thing.
Sure.
What I want to say about Conti though is like Conti is the second most used ransomware in the world. The leak was massive, like absolutely crazy. I mean, Conti's responsible for over 100 manufacturing facility ransomwares, like this last year alone.
Yeah.
Only losing out to Lockbit, but
the interesting part was like all the playbook is in the chat. Like they were saying, people asking questions. Hey, I've got Cobalt Strike. What I do now? They just fucking give all the commands to run and exactly what they do. So it's good for defenders too because how they can be around and moving laterally and what they're doing. So.
Yeah.
So because it's been leaked, that means it's quote unquote open source now, as opposed to like you had to buy on the black market, or what does that really mean?
The source is leaked, but there's like it doesn't have the locker part of it.
Yeah, it doesn't have like a decrypt key or anything like that. It also generates unique pairs every time they like goes out and does its thing. But like how it works, its family, the associated malware with it, all of the source code, the playbooks, how Conti operates, their business practices as a ransomware, as a service group, all of those types of things.
Much more easy to identify and combat, right?
Yeah, I haven't jumped in as deep as like my threat intel team has, but there's like discussions about like, even the people that bought Conti services being part of that league.
And there's like that account's not talking now. There's probably an affiliate that had access that got cut off after weeks, but it was interesting how they were using Gsocket to connect to the servers. It was like dropping connection strings, connecting servers and stuff.
Not even that deep.
Yeah. I'd never heard of Gsocket before this. I started looking into it after I saw it in there.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
It's big. But it also like shows that it's like very strange how these groups like conduct their business services. It almost felt like when I was this is our Discord server. You like get an invite, you join, and like you get your services, and then like you pay, and then like it felt like a private Discord. That's what it felt like.
Yep.
I was like, what is going on here? It felt like a private Discord. I was like, it was a little bit too easy to get access to Conti, but like you had to know people to do it. But it felt very surface.
You know which bar to go to. You can just walk in and.
It felt very surface level for like how to get access to this stuff.
Cool.
So yeah, it sounds like we were talking about. That's what I went to the next slide. Is the Conti ransomware gang got owned. There's debate on who actually leaked it. I think a lot of sources have called it the Ukraine researcher. I think because they released it, and then more recently they've released more logs. So there's still a lot of stuff to still go through. So I think this is going to be a news slide that we'll probably have up for at least one or two more. I think there's going to be new stuff. A lot of this came about though because Conti kind of put their own foot in their mouth and supported Russia, and with Conti, there's a mix of Russian and Ukraine hackers that are doing this work. So if the other countries, there's kind of a bit of discourse within the group there that it could be someone involved, or it could be someone that's actually owned their chat. I think it's like Jabber or something. Their chat server. The logs are January 2021, so last year's January to now, and they are still releasing fresh logs. So that's interesting. Brian Krebs has done like a 4-part series so far on the leak and has some really interesting insights. The biggest one is probably that it acts like a business. Of course, working conditions at a ransomware gang is not great. And at one point, they lost control of their infrastructure. Like they had a botnet that they forgot to renew like a certificate on and lost a bunch of their bots. So it's kind of like, wait, I've worked here before.
You sound like you have pretty good experience.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
I'm not raising my hand and saying I never renewed that certificate, but I may not have renewed that certificate.
I mean, at least someone else didn't renew it for them, because that's happened before.
Yes, it has.
Certificates are hard, man.
Yep. So they didn't make 180 million in revenue last year, so that's a lot of dough. They're also, I don't know if you look, if you dig in, I think they're paying some of these coders and like low level people $2,000 to $5,000 a month. So you can do the math on that one, and that is not a great paying job.
Yeah, but
It's a
we
lot
want
of
to be
rubles though.
we want to be the capital owner, not the worker.
Right.
Yeah. Don't listen to Marx.
Hey, then you're just talking about a startup, and we know startups can be a bit of a shit show themselves. So
Look, man, you've been after us to quit our jobs and start a thing. This is the thing.
oh, hey, sure, let's do it.
Colasec has obviously run its course. I mean,
Yeah, it's not a ransomware thing.
No, Colasec suddenly becomes a shell company. That's
Right. It's a shell, bro.
Colasec goes from being a non-profit that takes in maybe like $1,000 to $2,000 a year in donations to taking in $35 million a year in donations. Shady overseas companies.
How do I make this money to you?
Well, one of the things I'm going to start up a lot like Conti is the R&D department, where they have their own EDR and AV for a dual reason. One, to get past, but then two, so they can watch their employees, because the people we're going to be hiring are going to be shady as hell. And we need to be watching them on a regular basis to make sure they're not talking to Brian Krebs.
We'll just partner with Kaspersky. It'll be fine.
That has its own fun, I imagine.
Jeff, just for that, I'm getting a beer.
do you have a slide for that?
What about an MSP that caters exclusively to criminal organizations?
On top of that, they paid $60,000 for a legitimate Cobalt Strike license, so they could do research on that too. But
Oh wow.
What's interesting is that $30,000 went towards a license, and $30,000 went to the company that bought it for them legitimately. So it's almost like subcontracting Cobalt Strike to them. Then they're into OSINT tools. They also, what was really enlightening was they have relationship with negotiators. So they will talk with negotiator directly. Like negotiators will give them like, this company can go this high based on cyber insurance. And that was another thing that was interesting, is that they will work with companies that have cyber insurance. The payouts are going to be less, but they're more likely to pay if they have cyber insurance, versus if they don't have cyber insurance, they could potentially get more money out of them, but less likely to get a payment. So that was an interesting thing. Any other comments? Because I can go into the last item otherwise. All right. So that's to be continued. The skating dog story is that the 49ers were ransomware by Black Bite. I got some echo, by the way. I don't know if that's new. All right. Anyways, what's interesting about this? Nothing really here. They restored systems. This could have severely impacted their Super Bowl if they had made it, because they did get knocked out in the NFC, and because their systems were ransomware, they would have not necessarily had the greatest preparation for the Super Bowl, which would have been an interesting storyline after the Super Bowl. But because they didn't make it there, it's not a big story right now. But just interesting to note. All right, what other news did we miss?
Were they like potential for the Super Bowl?
Yeah, they were in the NFC Championship game.
Yeah, they were. Who were they playing?
Green Bay?
That doesn't sound right, but maybe.
Rams. I think they lost to the Rams.
That's right. They lost to the LA Rams.
Yeah. Ooh, you can tell we sports ball.
The other one that went to the Super Bowl.
Right.
This is a 50-50 chance. Obviously, we all know much more about sports than we do about computers.
Indeed.
Yeah, sports ball.
Sports ball.
I spend all of my time looking at spreadsheets about football and not about, lines controls and things like that.
So Jeff just dropped a link in here about a ransomware defendant extradited to the United States.
Yeah, it was the Kaseya ransomware attack from last July. That he was a Ukrainian working for the Russian organization, and they had him in Poland, and the Polish extradition treaty sent him to Texas earlier this month. So it'll be interesting to see what comes from that.
All the states to get extradited to.
Yeah,
Texas is not the one I would pick.
Well, if you're fleeing a country that's being invaded by Russia, you have limited options on where you're going. So there's more fallout for ransomware criminals.
Well, he was
video today where someone was on their laptop and they had to like lift lift up their dog off of the keyboard so they could hit them. That's special.
I just have a small child. That's, handle keyboard.
Are we back yet, or what's going on?
I logged back in.
Well, the SLA list is at least 24 hours. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, director.
I'm seeing live on YouTube with technical difficulties, so I think we're good.
Okay, just a brief hiccup.
You are at the premium service tier. This is it. This is us. Would you like to join our Discord?
Please continue.
We have a Discord? I thought we abandoned that.
We abandoned it almost a week after we started it.
All right, continue. Tim, go. Let's do it.
We need a gym membership.
How did Tim get involved in another conversation?
He's got a buddy there. All right, MC.
Oh, wait, that's a B-box. Never mind. That's not an MC. All right. All right. We're going to skip because we're behind. We're going to skip the cool wall for this month, and we're going to go right into the director. So, Mr. Corey Grant, fellow co-organizer of ColaSec, we'll be talking about getting your cybersecurity career started. And it talks about his journey and recommendations for getting into cybersecurity. While my journey was a more traditional one, we will discuss the pros and cons of other paths into the field. I'll also provide my recommendations on what training and certifications are best. There are many ways to get into cybersecurity, so there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach. Mr. Corey Grant, the director.
Do we want to bring up the other idea that we had about this kind of information on the website?
Another idea. Sure. What was the other idea?
Go for it. Have we forgotten this months later?
Yeah, he wasn't at the organizer meeting, so.
Yeah.
Might not be
So
aware.
this is one of the things that we're thinking about expanding on the website is to have content like this sort of penned in a place where it's easy for folks to get at, and we can direct folks when they're like, "What do I do?" Go here, watch this video, and then look at these resources. Another thing that we're experimenting, or we've been toying with, we haven't done it yet, is to maybe get gift cards for things like Pluralsight or other training resources like that. I'm obviously not going to get a gift card to Sands because I got $5,000 for a hole in my pocket. Right. But at least something that gets you a month of Pluralsight or something like that, or a raffle or something like that. So. What is happening?
There are other cybersecurity courses that are fantastic that don't cost $5.
Sure.
If you want to do like a 1-year thing, there's some courses that are great that cost like $100.
Yeah.
So something I heard about recently was Alyssa Miller's putting out a book called the Cybersecurity Career Guide. So I've told someone I need to read this book, but it might be a good starting point. We'll kind of see. There's some other stuff. I've got a free book. I've also got my own personal project with the idea of like the beginner's guide to the security galaxy, where it's kind of like a reference point for people to be able to, because that's one of the things we tell people is you're going to have to sift through all of security because it's so broad and involves a bunch of different stuff. And so giving people some sort of like maybe cliff notes of different areas so they can kind of start, and resource links would be a good starting point for people. So I think we're kind of trying to refocus this year on providing more security resources for people just looking to get in.
All right, Tim. That's enough stealing the presenter's thunder.
Are we just going right into presentation? Usually we take like a 10-minute transmission.
Yes, we're going to do a transmission straight into the presentation. Does anyone need a quick break? We can. No. All right, let's get started. We have delayed enough tonight.
I've got to resize everything now.
No pressure, right?
Yeah, so I'll mess it up.
There's a very good chance that I might mess it up.
Right. I've covered presentations, I guess. Honestly, I don't know how you guys do it, all of that. Presentation, that presentation. I was on a customer call today and they pushed back on the report, I was trying. Like, I'm not to do presentations, I'm not to have conversations.
That's what I was trying to do a lot of companies. You can do it 3 times before the call, and you get on the call. Internet drops or something.
You gotta sacrifice a chicken and start giving the tea leaves. I'm ritualistic loincloth.
Under the, you can't see it because the webcam.
Oh, look at that. Okay, very good. Jeff, Tim, can y'all still see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Complimentary swig of beer. So, Corey Grant, Cybersecurity Operations Director is my title. Work at a financial institution that many of you are probably very familiar with. There's a couple of pictures of me and some of my things that I like to do. Just had a son about 18 months ago, almost at this point. So, husband and father, 7 years in IT, 6 in cybersecurity. That's probably closer to 7 at this point. Got my bachelor's of arts from Gaffney, Limestone. Gamer, occasional woodworker, professional time waster, procrastinator. So that kind of on the bottom right there, you can actually see our first major woodworking project. Me and a buddy put together it's actually 8 feet long and about 4 feet wide. Stupid heavy. It's made out of just commercial grade, just stuff you get from Lowe's. So no OSB. We did have the legs are 4x6s, so we had to special order those. But the top of that thing was stupid heavy. It's dumb. But anyway, made it. And that's a game of League of Legends. HOTS there at the bottom. I had a really game as Rexar. So game of screenshots.
Thanks, Corey. No one play out.
Yeah, no problem. So about this presentation, so just most of this is going to be my journey and how I got into cybersecurity and kind of that avenue. As I go through this, I'll encourage anybody who wants to share your journey if it parallels with mine or differs from mine. I think everybody in the room comes from a different walk and kind of has a different path that they ended up taking. So, but we'll go over kind of career roadmap, education, conferences and events, certifications, internships, information security groups, interviewing, and then landing the job. So I'll give some of my anecdotes as we go along through those. So feel free to stop me at any time if there are questions. So career roadmap. I knew when I started or once I got into kind of college that I wanted to be in cybersecurity. So I knew where I wanted to go. I knew kind of had the path of what college to go to, or not what college to go to, but what courses to take and what certifications to look at, and kind of figured all that out. So I knew I was going to take that very traditional path in. So I had goals and things that I set along the way that I knew I wanted to reach. Like I knew I was going to need a 4-year degree, so I went and got my 4-year degree. I did set small objectives or things that I wanted to do while I was reaching those major goals. There's obviously life goals in that, getting married, buying a house, all those things kind of wrap up into that. And so creating those milestones, for lack of a better term, project management, if you're familiar with any of that, right? You create the milestone and then you celebrate the small bits and pieces to get along that you obtain as you go along. And the last part of that would be just, profiting off of that, right? So, right. So, so I've got big paragraphs here, but so what do I mean by goals, right? So for me, this was a big item, like buying a house, getting married, having a child, like I mentioned. Becoming a CISO was one of my initial goals. I thought I wanted to be a CISO, so and getting my degree. Typical life goals, but I know I never claimed to be an exciting person, right? So those are all things you would expect to hear. Each person's goals may be different and depend upon where you are starting your journey. Again, going back to that idea that everybody probably started in a different place. I took, again, a very traditional path. This is what I wanted to do, so I went to school and that sort of thing. Have them, right? Have where you want to be going in mind. If you don't have a destination, you will wander. If you have a destination, you can take a path to get to that destination. So what about objectives? So you've got your final destination, you've got your goals, your things you want to reach. What about the items as you go along? So think of objective as tasks that need to be completed to reach the goal. Again, these are going to vary, vary from person to person, but the thing to keep in mind is to set objectives that are attainable, right? So break your goal down into smaller pieces, have those separate objectives. For me, these were things like getting certain grades, successfully completing big work projects, certifications, or just participating in events that are about information security. So let your goals be big and keep your objectives small and attainable, right? Milestones. So think of milestones as like checkpoints in a video game, right? Once you've reached a milestone, you know that you don't have to go back from that point. You can always start back from there. So even if you don't reach your goal or if you don't reach your next objective, you've got a checkpoint that you can fall back on. For me, milestones were getting a new job or a promotion. I celebrated these events to provide myself with reward. Bought my first bottle of scotch whenever I got my first job, right? First job into IT. So there should be less milestones than there are objectives, but for bigger goals, you may have multiple milestones. So again, that idea of creating steps for yourself. Again, I don't expect everyone would have these written down and organized with time frames or dates, but I would recommend that you spend some time putting thought into them and developing them. Keep in mind that these can probably can and will change as you travel along your journey. As I mentioned before, there are many things that took longer than I expected for a myriad of reasons. Allow your objectives and milestones to float and be flexible, but keep your goals solid. So always head towards your goal, but if you need to change your objective or your milestone, then do so. Yes.
I wandered into security, completely accidentally fell here. Totally by mistake. Not where I intended to be at all.
It's a thing that happens. Some people take that path. It seems like a lot of folks get into IT and then they kind of want maybe something more, and it seems like they kind of like,
let's try this out.
Yeah.
And it just kind of takes off.
Yeah.
I wanted to be a network engineer.
How'd that work out for you?
So fucked in the head.
I wanted to manage spanning tree and routing groups.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
now you know Adam. See, now you know what's wrong with him. So
There's a tremendous.
So education. So this is what I kind of dubbed the traditional approach, right? This is, when you're growing up, parents like, go to college, get a degree, you'll get a job, yada, yada, like you'll be set for life, right? So let's talk about education. This is a topic that some people are divided on. I take a practical view on education and could argue either way. Since we're focusing on my journey, I'll give you how my education may or may not have helped my journey. Education knowledge on subject related to security. Right? If I had been smarter, I would have taken my CISSP certification right out of college, as all of the theory learning that I did was at that same level. So I went for computer information system security is what I was heading for. So principles and practices that should be applied in the real world. Now, this is where we could probably get into discussion about the value of that knowledge. I'll agree. A pro. You need job experience to back the knowledge so that it becomes practically applicable. That cross-section is where the true value is. So going to school gives you that foundation, that theory, the trope about, new kid out of college, he thinks he knows everything, right? And from a theory standpoint, he or she does. But from a practicality standpoint, actually applying. So that's where that job experience comes in. You build that Venn diagram with that circle, the circle in the center of that, wherever that shape is, right?
But how do I get job experience?
Well, we'll cover that one a little bit later. That's the tough one.
One thing I will point out on this, just to interrupt you for a bit, some HR departments won't do the swapping of experience. Tolerate is hiring contractors. So you are short on the educational experience, but have the job experience. Perhaps just be willing to work as a contractor instead of being a full employee somewhere.
Yeah.
Because the contractor don't mind slinging dollars at you as long as you have the skills.
Right.
Will go and say that cybersecurity is one of those unique fields where 4-year education isn't really required or needed. That being said, there because you don't have a 4-year degree.
Yeah.
I feel like
You government.
I feel like that's changed every time too. maybe not for government, but like, you know, for like a customer I came from, or where I came from, used to be, you had to have a bachelor's degree, they wouldn't even look at your resume.
Right.
And so that's why I went to 4-year college, you know, got in, moved up. But like right before I left, they were hiring people right after jobs that used to require a bachelor's degree, just because there wasn't enough talent to fill open positions in the market. They were having a hard time getting people, so they had to, you know, unless you wanted to pay out the butt, you know,
Right.
you had to be willing to take someone that had a 2-year degree. They did, and it worked out, but I mean, I'd say, you know, 4-year degree isn't as important as it used to be.
Yeah, I would agree. So that's a good segue. So is the checks that HR do when you apply for a job, right? So those are those HR check boxes. There are things that qualify you for a position before the hiring manager even gets to see your resume. This seems to be the biggest point of frustration for most people. They don't understand why they need to have to check these boxes. I agree. I think that boxes are arbitrary and don't add up to much of all the effort that goes into them. That said, did my best to figure out what those HR check boxes were and smash them for no other reason than to get the chance to interview. Got to play the game to win the game, right? So you go check those boxes, get the degree, get the certification. No, does it mean you have that knowledge, or does it necessarily provide an indication of how much of that knowledge you've retained? Maybe, maybe not. Depends on the person. But HR requires those check boxes. You're not. So that's kind of your ticket in the door. Yes.
I'd also say that in the field, from the big four and government on one side, all the way over to startup land on the other side, and like there's that spectrum. So the less formalized your education is, the further away from Deloitte and the EY and Capgemini you should be, like closer to the smaller custom data security or something like that.
Somewhere that isn't known nationally, like if it's a small startup or a local company that no one's heard of outside of your state.
Yeah. So
that's
smaller companies are your friends with the less formalized education in the beginning of your career.
Yeah, I 100% agree.
If there's one positive that I is substituted for experience, so like Adam was talking about earlier, if you're behind the curve in getting your career started or want to get a head start, then education can give you that opportunity. As I did, you can go to school while you're working. Now, I did this at an age where I was a bachelor and didn't have the added responsibility that I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, so I won't pretend to know the added stress of the effort required to having a family, but I do know people that have done it, so I know it can be done. Equaling experience, many times job descriptions you'll see that you need 2 years plus a bachelor's or 10 years of experience. If you do the math, you'll see that there are some time savings. Not to mention, you could, in theory, fast track a bachelor's. So if you go to Wesleyan University, some of these, especially now, have fast track bachelor's for cybersecurity. So you could work in IT while you're trying to get your degree in cybersecurity. Probably close to 6 years of experience somewhere in there, right? That's probably somewhere in that time frame.
I think some schools, I don't know whether they're paying them. Some schools have their students like running their SOC.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes.
I want the world to know that I made my final payment of Sally Mae yesterday.
Very good.
Hey,
that is something to celebrate.
I've got no more deep information. So, I've been told Clemson, their SOC is run by their students.
Hey,
The
Jeff.
USC help desk is from my students.
Hey Jeff, hasn't VT hired or had students working with the security team before?
So yeah, it's a do some like in SOC experience with people, and that's actually not gone overly well. But what we do have is our IT security lab, which tries to work directly with students to give them like research opportunities and support and resources to let them work. That part has been very successful.
So all that to say, I consider education a necessary evil. The biggest tip that I can give newcomers is to double up your education with working if possible. And if you're taking courses that lead towards a certification, then get that certification at the end of the class. No reason to miss out on it since you have the knowledge. When I got my bachelor's, and I probably could have gotten it. I could have been an associate CISSP instead of now being 6-7 years into my cybersecurity career and still not having my CISSP. Could have already been certified, could have carried that forward. So,
Just a note, the test is changing in June or July to be harder. So
wonderful. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be in my roadmap this year. Where I'm working now pays for SANS courses. Kind of good. So hopefully it doesn't come up. But so education again, degree programs. Jeff, is that you? I hear something behind me. So education degree programs. So I don't recall these being something that were around whenever I was going to school. But so saying like places like that have these different like certification companies sometimes too, SANS, now have like bachelor's degree programs that you can go into. And so you take the SANS courses and you end up with a bachelor's degree by the time you come out of it. They have like a SANS EDU. So that's kind of an interesting path, interesting place. So you end up with a bunch of letters after your name and a bachelor's by the time you come out of it. If you doubled that up with working somewhere and it took you 4 years to do it, you come out with. I mean, heck, that's.
And I'd need a nap after all that.
You would, yeah.
just another thing about working and taking the courses is some companies have better, tuition reimbursement than others, so you can kind of definitely take advantage of that. I know one employer that I had in the past paid 100% directly to the school, so it's not like you pay up front, they pay back. They
Yeah.
Right?
That's a good
So
deal.
definitely look into that and see what's available at your employer.
Yep.
Programs, while the undergraduate program specifically has to be taking is like an add-on to another undergraduate program. So it's really only the last 2 years of your college that's replacing. Because it doesn't do any core requirements like that. The state of South Carolina would require you to get. So it's like a non-core. I don't know what you refer to that as, but if you had an associate's degree.
Yeah.
That being said, all of that aside, if your company offers tuition reimbursements and not training reimbursements, you can use that tuition reimbursement on SANS without actually enrolling in their full graduate program or like undergraduate program or whatever, by taking one-off single courses.
Mm-hmm.
As a student, which still qualifies for that tuition reimbursement, it's like a way to scam this if they offer it. So that is a way to turn tuition reimbursement into a SANS certification.
That makes sense.
Fun fact.
Yeah, that's a good pro tip.
Also, and I can't remember. Command, I think that's where it's coming from, is actually providing money for, I think, your last 3 years of undergrad and your master's if you agree to go into a government or a education related environment. So they've done this in the past with education, going into being a teacher and things like that, and they're kind of modeling a same program along those lines. So there's actually a lot of money and scholarship out there for people who want to try and get into that, with the added benefit of both internships within the federal government and job placement afterwards, because that's one of the tough parts, is the job placement afterwards.
Not that I would recommend it as everyone's preferred option, but if you score an 80 or higher under ASVAB, you can enroll in U.S. Army Cyber Command, and that will let you take 12 SANS courses and 12 weeks of net wars continuous during like a 6-week intensive boot camp where you get to experience all types of cybersecurity and then do 3 to 6 years of cybersecurity in the military, which sets you up really well to enter the job field. Although that is a big commitment for a lot of people. If you have a family, there's a bunch of other stuff that goes into place, but the military option is really good.
Yeah. All good stuff. So conferences and events. So conferences are a great way to get exposure to other people in the field and to new ideas and techniques. Since most conferences aren't field specific, you can find all sorts of people from across the professional security spectrum at a conference. I personally am not or was not a big conference attender, but the couple that I've been to found to be really interesting, exposed me to a lot of new ideas. My personal favorite conferences are conference list B-Sides or even Security Onion. These smaller conferences attract local talent, and I felt less overwhelmed. I've not actually attended anything like a Black Hat or a DEF CON, mostly due to travel and entry cost. If you like conferences, then I'd recommend finding an employer that focuses on sending you to conferences. Since COVID, many of these conferences have moved to virtual attendance. I personally found this to be great because travel was always one of the biggest barriers for entry for me. And as a college student at the time, I didn't have the time or money to take a couple of days off to attend, much less what I would have done what that would have done to my bank account. So, working at Target while I went to college, couldn't really be like, hey, I'm just going to go take 2 weeks off. Just the bills wouldn't get paid, right? So, like I said, I've always enjoyed B-Sides. It's always a great smaller conference. Security Onion was another good one. I think that one was a little bit bigger at the time that I went to the B-Sides, but those are always really good. There's plenty of conferences out there that are low or maybe no cost depending. And of course, with the virtual attendance now, some of those are even free. So conferences, I think, are a good way to get exposure rather than not necessarily learning something per se. You do take away knowledge, obviously, but it's exposing you to other ideas and other people within the field. I mean, heck, at B-Sides, you'll see everything from the red team guys running around in groups of 3 or 4, dressed in black, to your professional guys running around, usually not at a C level, but, just one step down, your middle managers, that sort of thing. So.
Hey, so Corey, Anthony had a question.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I was going to comment on the conferences. Also, volunteering is a good way to get some more experience while you're there and meet more people. I volunteered for B-Sides, and it was a really fun experience. And they don't schedule you to work the whole day. They make it where you can actually attend some of the different presentations.
Yeah, I just give a shout out to B-Sides Augusta. It's a pretty good conference. It's pretty cheap too. You're talking about some of the bigger conferences like RSA and Black Hat. B-Sides San Francisco butts up to RSA, so you can go a couple days early and catch that. It's a cheap conference with a lot of good information, and then Black Hat DEF CON's right after it. It's kind of a free for all, but it's cheap and good information and a lot of cool speakers. So stay a day or two and catch that too.
Yes.
Yes, my pro hack has been if you have an IT job, you're trying to move into cybersecurity, you've been looking at these SANS conferences, you're like, maybe I want to get experience, go to a SANS conference, but you can't pay for it yourself. Maybe it's too expensive for your corporate employer. What you can do is fib a little bit to them, because SANS has a work study program where you go and you're volunteering at the conference, and it changes it from being like $8,000 to $1,500 to $2,000 depending on the class that you take. And then you can say, like, it only costs $2,000 to go to the conference. But what they don't know is that when you're there, you'll just be volunteering as a facilitator or as a TA or like a moderator for the conference. Which, if from my personal experience, I think it's a more rewarding aspect because you get to meet more people, you get to talk to more people, and you get personal FaceTime with your instructor outside of class hours. So like then you can just sort of like say you can sign up for that, apply for it, they'll write like a little essay. And then you send that off, and then it's only $2,000 for the conference. You can sell that to your employer better. Or if you are really trying to make that transition, it is a more justifiable cost than like $8,000.
Yeah.
And then, then you get a lot of added benefits. You get to meet all the other facilitators. It's a more wholesome conference and more enjoyable conference experience. So I always recommend that people go do the work study program. It's on the website. Go to opportunities, scroll down, work study, apply.
Good stuff.
So other conferences do similar things, and I know for ShmooCon, they do a thing where as a corporate entity or a person, you can pay and then pay half price for a ticket for someone who is a student and make that available. And that's, I think you get if you choose to do that, you get like priority to get in and get an actual ticket. So sometimes conferences can be very hard to get access to, and so sometimes those things help out that as well. So you also get a ticket, but you're also supporting someone. So if you're in kind of a corporate situation and you want to try and help, you can do that as well.
Let's get to
Let's get there.
slide.
Oh, I have no idea, to be honest with you. I don't
I'm
know.
like 99% sure that's good.
Yeah, that's definitely good.
Found it on the internet. Certifications. So CompTIA. Whenever I was getting in and kind of looking at certifications, what to get, I came across CompTIA at some point. I think I might even found it on a deal or something. Generally speaking, I think the price has gone up. I think it was like $300 at the time for me, but their certifications I find to be pretty good baseline. They're not super in depth. They're not like a SANS course. There's not a course necessarily even attached to the CompTIA certification most of the time, unless you find it on a deal or something. But like I said, it shows that kind of baseline level of knowledge. Air quotes, low cost, depending, right? It's all relative. Self-study is possible. I did pass the Security Plus with minimal self-study. Having experience, obviously already working in the field helps. And then fairly easy to understand and pass the exams. They're not super tricky. They're fairly straightforward and just kind of almost like a vocabulary test, right? Like, this, what is this? That sort of thing. So I got my Security Plus first. It was excellent baseline security skills and knowledge kind of exam or certification. I ended up going for my CySA, which is cybersecurity analyst. So that got more into, actually looking at attacks and vulnerabilities and that sort of thing. So that's a pretty good one. That technically stacks with CompTIA. I think once you have two of their certs, they stack and they give you like a free third one. So technically you can claim you have three. And then, they've got the Pen Test Plus and then CASP, which is security architecture and engineering. So all of those, those CompTIA certifications are pretty good. They're probably attainable for the individual. Probably don't need somebody to help you pay for those. Maybe you do. Again, cost is all relative, right? So, SANS certification. So we've covered this one kind of already, but SANS certs are great. The cost is highly prohibitive, though. I don't know about most other people. I don't happen to have $7 to $8 grand just laying around that I can be like, I think I'll take a SANS course. I have bills, I've got debt, that probably is going to go to those things, right?
You do have $8,000 laying around.
I can come up with $8,000 if I need to. I don't have it laying around.
He's got $8,000 waiting to be a hole. He then has to fill up.
It's already spent, is what I would say. Right there, yeah. That I pay back at like 22% on top of that. So, deep dive into specific areas of cybersecurity. So again, very, very great. You can go to the SANS site, of course. They've got all their certification paths and everything listed out. You can look at the different descriptions. And it's a really good dive into any one specific subject. There are multiple certification paths, like I just mentioned. They've got everything from like entry level type courses in cybersecurity to more advanced. We already mentioned the high cost, probably prohibitive without an employer to pay for those courses for you. Extensive knowledge requirement. I personally find the SANS courses to be a lot of knowledge, especially in a boot camp or like a 1 week period. I don't do well with the live courses. I do better with kind of the on demand. And generally, over the course of a month, I have to digest that information. So, and then highly sought after certification. So you will see SANS certifications on job requirements and that sort of thing, or maybe you can satisfy a job requirement with a SANS certification, that sort of thing. So if you've been in the field for any amount of time, I would assume everybody that's listening or that's in the room probably knows about SANS and it's pretty well known, right? Internships. So internships are an excellent way to get on the job training. Helps you learn the ropes by providing a realistic understanding of what happens in the world of cybersecurity. So again, going back to your practical or your theory knowledge in school that you would get, internships is kind of your first or could be your first foray into actually applying that knowledge, that theory that you got. Rare or even sometimes hard to obtain. It depends. In employers that I've worked at, internships have always been rare. When you bring it up, they're like, we don't do interns. This is too much trouble. So work with your current employer and or the security team to shadow. So if you can't directly get an internship, there may be an opportunity for you to kind of like weasel your way in, if you will. Actually, a fellow that we just hired recently did just that. He was working somewhere and he knew he needed cybersecurity experience, and he actually ended up talking with the security team and said, "Hey, can I just shadow you?"
Like an existing employee?
Yeah. It was actually at a state agency, and I think he started working with their SOC, and they kind of let him in the door, if you will. So that's always good. Again, maybe you could go that route, and then kind of to piggyback off of what he mentioned was creating a list of subjects that you want to learn. So if you can come up with what your objectives are again, and kind of bring that to that internal security team or whoever you can work with. Sometimes you can engage a CISO or management and say, "Hey, I want to learn these things," right? And that kind of helps people be like, "Okay, we've got a direction for you, something you actually want to. We can point you at." So,
Get the thing. Don't just wing it.
Come on.
Well, and that's me showing through in the presentation. And so I plan, and I'm a schemer, right? I make a plan, make a list, do the things, check off the boxes. Okay, we're good. Like,
That's the reason you're called the director.
that's what I do. Drives the wife nuts. We've talked about goals and things before. Doesn't always apply. So again, make the list. And it's not to say, again, going back to the idea of the list and dates and that sort of thing. I didn't have dates beside things that I wanted to do. I had, years like I wanted to buy a house at a certain age and that sort of thing. I missed those goals. Just so that's stated, I missed those goals by 2 or 3 years, and it took me 2 or 3 years longer than what I wanted to get married. But I got the goal. Like, I reset to my milestone, my checkpoint, right? And you build back off of that. So, information security groups. Hey, guess what? You're already here, right? So, yeah, I know, right? One you can check it off your list, right? So usually local professionals, chance to get to know people that are already in the field can sometimes lead to a pre-interview. Does require extra effort. Involvement is good, right? So I owe my first job in cybersecurity to actually Adam through Colasec. And so getting involved in Colasec, getting the exposure, talking with other people in the local area, that's where that kind of that pre-interview that I'm talking about, somebody getting involved outside of the work hours, right? Even just showing up, like everybody that's here, everybody that's watching, we kind of know each other on a first name basis. We probably shook hands, we've all sat in the same room together. We've eaten a snack, we've had a beer. So we've gotten to know personality, right? We've gotten to know maybe some skill sets and that sort of thing. So what are you laughing at, Adam?
Nothing. I just would have flipped over the drunk a snack and eaten a beer.
Oh, well, maybe.
Corey, how did you find Colasec?
How did I find Colasec?
Once upon a time, we were like actively advertising on Twitter and LinkedIn. And
So like one day.
Corey, you were working for the state agency, right?
Loradac.
Yeah, it would have been. I was working with Loradac at the time. I honestly don't remember. I think we did. I think I might have come to my first Colasec with you. I don't know.
Lost to history.
Yeah, I honestly don't remember.
No, I'm just curious. Origin stories.
Yeah, it was definitely word of mouth. I don't recall it being advertised anywhere. Like I never have been a big Twitter or Facebook person, so I didn't stumble across it there. But I don't know. I honestly don't remember. It's a good question.
Was it a bar? Was it Conquest? Was it Wit? Was one of those?
It may have been. That would make sense. Yeah, getting involved in an information security group again. My experience is that's an excellent way to go, right? Like I said, Adam gave me my first kind of foot in the door. That was always the problem, right? So you go for a cybersecurity or security interview, and they're like, "Well, what kind of security experience do you have?" You're like, "Well, none." But I've been in IT for 5 years. Okay, well, that doesn't apply. Well, yes, it does, because I work at an agency that deals with HIPAA, and I've got to deal with compliance and regulatory. And if there's a security concern, guess who they come to? Yeah, me. So, yes, I've got that experience. Selling that, and we'll get into interviews actually on the next slide, but selling, we can talk about selling that experience in a second. But yeah, getting into a local information security group is probably my number one tip. That would probably be like, get involved. just go get involved, that sort of thing. So applying to interviews. So I think if you had to take away one thing from this slide is apply for jobs even if you don't meet the requirements, right? Sometimes, most times, HR is probably involved somewhere along the way with writing the requirements. If you look at job descriptions, sometimes you will notice it's completely cockeyed as far as what they're actually looking for. What they want and what they're actually needing are two completely different things. So apply for it. Okay. Worst thing's going to happen. They won't call you. Okay. Like, it's not a big deal, right? Review the job description and modify your resume to include the same keywords. This is another big one for getting past that HR firewall that I found. At one point, my resume was organized as such that I had like a block of like, here are the technologies that I have experience with, and it was just lists of things. That resume got me more interviews than any other resume I've ever had, and I'm thoroughly convinced is because it checked all the automated HR checkboxes. Oh, this guy knows about Cisco, and he knows about Palo Alto, and he knows about blah blah blah.
Yeah, you don't have to write a narrative about all the things you know. Just
right.
List the words, and HR will go, "Oh, look, he's got the thing."
Yeah. Yes.
If you take that,
Make sure you do have those experience though, because in an interview it might come up.
Yeah, don't fake it. I'm not. Yeah, don't fake it.
I mean, and it's be careful with what you say because you may get questions about it.
Yeah.
So
if you've looked at a bash shell once upon a time, hey, I'm Dutch Linux.
Yeah. Here, get out of VI. Show me how you do this.
Dude, I've been using V for a decade. I have no idea.
What are we gonna say, Alex?
Just take an extensive list of technologies, compress it down to like 2-point font, white it out, and stick it in the corner of your resume.
Q exclamation.
In theory, it gets you past that checkbox, right? So,
well, quite frankly, though, in interviews, if we're asking for like compliance and you have things that, if you're healthcare and you have HIPAA and they have never had HIPAA and it's a requirement, then they're not going to make it. And basically you look at that with a control F and say, do they ever mention HIPAA?
Yeah.
And that it's kind of crappy and I hate it, but if you can't mention the requirements that are there when you have those requirements, then you're probably not going to get that job.
Right.
Or in my experience, make sure when you do that control F that they can spell HIPAA.
Also that.
Is it 2 P's or 2 A's? Or 2 I's? Who knows?
That is true.
Never 2 H's.
So that goes back to kind of that first or the second point of reviewing the job description and modifying your resume, right? So like you can have a resume that's a template, right? You can have like your base information. You can already have your dates of employment, all that stuff filled out. You can shotgun that out. I did that at one point in time. It's very low return on minimal effort. So you might get an interview, you might not if you just send out a generic description or generic resume, right? So as you're reviewing the job description, highlight anywhere in your experiences that matches the job description. So I will literally read through the job resume or the job description, and latch onto a keyword and go, okay. Then I look over at my resume and I look at my different blocks of where I've worked, and I say, where can I put this in? Like, where does this fit in as many places as possible, right? So I plug it in there. Again, don't fake it, don't lie. So just put it in where it fits. You might have to stretch it, you might have to reword it, but try to use the same words or whatever keyword that they had in that line that you found in the job description, right? Biggest tip is be prepared to not get the interview. For whatever reason, and well, I guess this goes into actually interviewing, but having that mental mindset, you may really want a job, you may really think you're perfect for it, and you may not get the interview. Okay, there's a myriad of reasons that could happen. It could be the HR firewall was hotter that day. They were burning all the resumes that came in. They put it in straight in file 13. Don't care about it, right? There's a whole bunch of reasons that could happen. So,
but the reason is not a moral failing on your part.
Right. Right.
Listen, why?
They may also have an internal candidate that they had to post for.
Also that.
Never intended to have anybody.
Really common. We have to post this online for a day.
Yeah.
Just to tease you.
Or you run into a guy like Tim, and if you don't have a period at the end of your list of other things that had periods on them, he just file 13, gone, right? Shredder. So switching over to the actual interview itself, right? Take notes and ask questions during the interview. There's different points of view, different opinions on this, but you are interviewing that employer as much as they are interviewing you. Even more so to the point, they are already interested. They have already came to you and said, hey, do you want to go on the first date? Right. And you've said yes, because you're now at the interview, right? So this is your chance to get to know them. This is the first chance you've officially had that opportunity, right? The questions, if at all possible, should be about things that were said during the interview. Again, a more pointed, a more direct or descriptive question, something that happened, is better than a more general one. You may have general questions. That's fine too. But if you can interact with those people that you're talking to, that's better. Yes.
Current events.
Yep.
Like,
Current events are a good one.
what do you guys do about a certain hour that will not be made here?
Mhm.
Back in December, like how did you guys prepare? How do you guys do your incident response? Anything, just last 4 months, current events.
Yep.
Pull out a story, learn it, and then go with that.
Yeah.
Have you patched it?
Right.
Yeah.
Have you patched your friend nightmare?
I mean, another thing I would say is like when you finally get offered the job, look at benefits and total compensation.
Oh, that's a good one. I'd put in
There's
there.
a big difference, like healthcare at one job I had was this price, it was really good. Healthcare at a different job was double the cost and wasn't as good, right?
Yeah.
So you got to factor all that in because
If you've never taken the time to go and learn how to compare healthcare plans and the dollar value difference between the two, it's worth spending a couple hours on YouTube just trolling through finding good videos to explain how to do that comparison, because you can leave thousands of dollars on the table because you chose the wrong healthcare plan, or because you thought, oh, well, I'm getting paid for $2,000 more here, but you're losing out on $6,000 worth of benefits. Like, you've got to be able to do that math. And then I don't know, maybe others were taught this. I was never taught that by any college professor, any high school economics class. My parents never taught me. I had no idea how to do it without going and spending hours on YouTube University. So,
and it's a big deal. I mean, and I've seen that some employers where they charge you more for health insurance based on your compensation, right? So
yeah,
if you make
that's a big
$50,000 a year, you pay this much. Make $80,000 a year, you pay this much.
Oh yeah.
So I've seen people accept jobs without even looking at the benefits package. It's crazy to do that.
I would go on just a asterisk that the benefits package is not as important on your first job.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
True. I'm talking about, I'm specifically talking about switching
yeah.
jobs, right?
That makes sense.
Comparing what you currently have to your new job.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's your first job, and
Yeah.
You get an offer, and it's your only offer, you might want to take it.
Yeah.
If you got 5 offers, you might want to look at the difference between benefits.
I'm interested in y'all's perspective as people who apply for jobs and also people who hire people.
42 minutes.
When do you bring up compensation? First interview, second interview, what if there are only 2 interviews? When you're talking to the HR screener, when do you bring up?
I asked right off the bat.
And
It's
to get an
like-
understanding, not, hey, I need this or I'm walking, but the window.
I think that's important to establish. I don't make it the first thing that I bring up in an interview, but once a good rapport has been established and like it's clear that there's still interest, right? Because if you go into the first 10 minutes of the interview and it's a Hindenburg situation and everything's up in flames, there's no point bringing that up. Like if you feel like you totally bombed the interview, fine, feel free to bow out without discussing it. But if things are going relatively well and there's a good conversation going, I think it's absolutely something that should come up in the first interview. Just because if they're offering way less than you're interested in working for, there's no sense in wasting anyone else's time. Like,
Yeah, I mean, if you apply for a job and you get in for an interview, I agree with what you said. If it's your first job, not as important. But if somebody reaches out for me, like a LinkedIn for a job, I immediately ask, what's the hiring range,
Sure.
the
Yeah.
basic questions, right? Because
If you're not hunting, somebody's looking for you.
yeah, if you're not
That's all
in
dollars.
if you're not in our range, like there's no need for you to waste time.
My caveat to that is, I don't know, not looking for jobs anymore, but when I was, if I was talking with one person, I need to be at least talking to three. It keeps them honest, right?
Yeah.
Because look, you don't have to outrun me, you have to outrun the bear, right?
Right.
I mean, it's what, I mean, who wants an engineer who's bad at math?
So, in a recent conversation, it came up in a job posting that was open to nationwide for teleworking, and there was a clause in there that said if you live in Colorado, this is the salary range, because Colorado passed a law that says that every job that gets posted has to have a salary range posted to it. And as we talk about things within that, one of the things that we should like expect from our lawmakers and the people who are supposed to be looking out for us is that kind of thing. It's the only state I think right now that does that, but hopefully more states will start adopting that, where any job posting has to have that salary range.
So it's interesting you bring that up because the place my wife works, the same position she's in, the remote job was posted in Denver, and had to list the salary range. And she's towards the low end of that salary range. It's a remote job, you can work from anywhere, right? So she's in the process of getting a promotion right now, based off of the data she got off of a Denver job listing for her same job. Job.
I think I would say is that if you're in the process of like securing your first job, especially if you're at school or you've just gotten into that whole job interviewing spot, and someone gives you an offer, I would say that you should take it feeling comfortable that you can then back out of it, because like every state other than like Missouri or Montana or something is a right to work state. That's a two-way street, you and the employer.
Yeah.
They can terminate you at any time for no cause, and you can walk away from your job at any time for no
Right.
cause.
You're under no obligation to show up to work.
So you're at no obligation to ever show up your first day of work, other than like back wages, or if they gave you a sign-on notice or something like that that has stipulations on it. That being said, you can just give it back. Go if you take a job, continue to like if you have someone calls you or there's another company that you want to work at that then comes back with an interview, go interview that. Even if you only worked 1 week, people think like there's like some weird permanent record that employers keep track of. Like they'll forget you in 2 days when you walk away, and as long as like maybe you might not be able to work there for 5 years, but after 6 years they probably will never remember that.
Unless you've interviewed with Tim DeBlock, they won't remember you.
Do what's best for you as an employee always.
Corporations aren't there to take care of you.
No.
Yeah. Another thing I would say is like, if you're taking a job that requires you to move, don't do anything until you start that job and get into that job, right? I know someone that made life changes based on a job they were offered.
Yeah.
Oh,
It came
yeah,
time to, go to that job, and oh yeah, we decided on somebody else. He's like, I just sold my house in like 1 day, and I don't have a house anymore.
Yeah, and right now, that's a big deal. Like,
Yeah.
you can put a house on the market and it's gone in 6 hours.
Yeah, exactly. So just, make sure you start employment, get on board before you make any life changes. Hell, rent a place close to where you're moving to.
Get one of these extended stay hotel for a month or something.
Yeah, I mean, it might cost you a little bit more, but there's apartment buildings that'll give you a 3-month lease, even a 1-month lease if you pay them enough, right? So.
And it would shock me if most companies aren't able to offer a hybrid solution for the first month of your employment.
Yeah.
While if you're transitioning from like here to Ohio or something.
I mean, another way to make sure that that doesn't happen is if you're transitioning, get reload, right?
Yeah.
Once they pay to move you and they get you in a
right.
apartment
They've
for a little
invested
bit,
the cash.
they don't want to lose that money, so they've invested in you. It's probably less likely to happen.
To circle back around to the interview, one tactic that I wanted to discuss, because I've been on both sides of this in an interview, is that it's really common for you to walk into an interview, get peppered with questions that are set up to get you to fail. Because the whole point of the interview is to filter candidates, right? They want to they want to see who's going to pass all their tests, and then that's the person they're going to hire. So if they pepper you with 10 questions and you get 2 of them right, and everybody else got more than that, well, you're not the candidate. But one way you can counter that is if you feel comfortable enough bringing up expand on the topics that they've peppered you on, right? Or pivot and use your experience to redirect their question and try to make it relevant to their organization, right? So if they're peppering you about a concept you have no knowledge of, pivot and ask them about something you do know about, and see if you can start a conversation, because the conversation is the important part.
Yes.
The conversation, rapport, and those soft skills are at least as important as your technical knowledge and you knowing how to answer their Sphinx questions that they brought into their interview. So that can help you to salvage an interview that feels like it's really going poorly if you pivot it and get it into a space where you're comfortable and you know how to show your skills, and they're going to come in trying to get you out of that space, but you can force it back into your comfort zone just as easily as they can force you out of it. So bear that in mind while you're interviewing.
Yeah, that segues into the kind of last 2 points on the slide there, which is don't just say generic things, catchphrases. Interviewers are often looking for personality, and don't be afraid to show who you are. The interviews that I do now are probably 80-20 as far as looking for personality, right? That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for somebody who can carry a conversation, somebody who I can just talk with, right? If you're not easy to talk to, then I'm probably not going to want to work with you on a daily basis. Now, there's a myriad of reasons that somebody could be awkward in an interview. It's high stress for most people. I freak out in interviews. I'll say one word misstep and I'll be like, well, the whole thing's shot. I'm done. So that's great. You know what? Never mind, gentlemen. It's been good. Try to stay out of your own head. Just have a conversation. That's really what it's about. It's just building that rapport. You've got about 30 minutes to build that rapport, right? And that's probably what it's about. There are technical interviews; those exist, and so those are a little more cut and dry. But show your personality and that sort of thing. Another point would be: don't be upset if you don't get the job after you have the interview, or if you think it's a bad interview, don't get too down on yourself. Again, there's a myriad of reasons as to why you may have not been chosen for the job. It may not have anything to do with you. Right before you walked in, whoever the hiring manager is might have just been chewed out by their boss, and they might come in an interview and just be like, you know what? I'm not hiring the person who walks in here. Screw them. Has nothing to do with you, right? You could be the star candidate, and it wouldn't matter because of that person's attitude. So don't forget about that.
So maybe a better time to have brought this comment on was on your previous slide with joining and stuff like that. I think it applies there for the applying as well. Whatever the statistic is, 60, 70, whatever percent of people get their jobs through their network.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So you can make a good impression and still not get the job, but you get the next job.
Yep.
They could be specifically, hey, we're going to have an opening. Let's reach back out to this guy.
I have specifically sat through interviews where we didn't hire a candidate for the position they were interviewing for, and called them back 20 minutes later, like, go apply for this position. And we ended up hiring them because they were such a good fit for the other job. We were like, you never know.
Right? I've seen that happen too.
Yeah.
Because just because you didn't know the person when you walk in the room doesn't mean you can't continue a relationship. If things went well, when you walk out of the room, you never get the job.
Again, if your skills aren't a fit for this particular job, they may be a fit for others. So if you can show that you can dance under pressure and shift from the place where you're getting beat up to somewhere else, that's valuable.
So landing your first job, right? What happens now that you've gotten your first job? Learn the ropes. Each company is different, has its own culture, its own risk appetite. I had a little bit of culture shock whenever I moved from a private background check company into the electric company. Was working at SCANA at the time. Those are two very different cultures. I was not a good fit for SCANA I wasn't there. I was there during the transition, but SCANA is a very slow moving, we've done things this way for 40 years. We don't need you coming in here changing time is a finite resource, right? And so when you start at an employer, you're gaining seniority, and seniority for most of us in our career field doesn't mean much. Like you're not going to get kicked out of a job because you don't have seniority by someone with higher seniority, but you are investing that finite resource and that time into that company. So talk with your supervisor, or talk with HR, talk with whoever you need to talk to begin to see what does your career path look like, right? It's going to be a tough conversation in my experience. If you go to your supervisor, they're going to be like, "What do you mean career path? We don't do that. We don't know what that means." But asking how you get to that next step, the best case scenario is that you have leadership, or that you have a supervisor that understands that you want to grow in your career and is reaching out to you and saying, "Hey, are you interested in this? Is this where you want your next step to be?" That sort of thing. So, and then my only thing here is job hopping as far as a negative. Try not to job hop. While it's not directly a bad thing, it does look like you can't commit to being somewhere or being at a company for a certain amount of time. In recent resumes that I've looked at, it seems to be, 2 years is usually when people change. Too many of those 2-year changes looks funky. It's not necessarily a bad thing. A lot of people these days are contractors. And so that kind of lends itself to, title changes or company changes. So, take it for what it's worth. I was at my first job for 5 years, and then I moved. Gosh, I'm trying to remember now. I was at one place for 5 weeks. So, that was awkward.
Does that even go on the resume? Just leave it off the resume.
I usually just leave it off the resume. And then I was at the next place for about 1.5 to 2 years. Next place for about 2 years. And then I've been at my current employer for about 2 years. So, you can move around.
2 years I think 2 years is a healthy time in the IT cyber field.
Yeah.
Like if you were 2 years at a place, I wouldn't feel bad about that, or leaving or whatnot, or like the only people that feel bad about that are usually from a different career field or a different generation.
Yeah.
Like 2 years is perfectly okay in IT.
Yeah, and it's those rungs on the ladder, milestones in terms of salary.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? I mean, if you're doing it just to move, but if you're making 20% more, tally ho.
That's
I
my
don't give a
mark.
damn if you've been there 6 months. Go.
And
Money's
what else?
money.
If someone asks you in an interview, you just tell them that.
Yeah.
Hey, nobody likes an engineer who's bad at that.
Right.
You can always, and if you ever feel bad about the salary question, like you just ask them, like, "Hey, if you got a 40% job, like raise, would you still be in your position?"
Right.
And the person would be like, "Yeah, fuck no, I'm sorry."
Yeah.
I'd also be gone. Like, "Oh, sorry, I can't blame you all of a sudden."
As it would turn out, I'm going to say that 100% of people work so they can get paid. I mean, just an assumption, maybe. I don't know. I guess there's some people that work for fun. I guess it's possible. Maybe when I retire, that's kind of my plan. But who knows?
Yeah, what's your plan before to retire? Why you promote?
Right.
Unfortunately, you have to make those moves in most companies, like leave a company to get that kind of salary increase. And
Yeah.
like you said, it's HR's job to get you to do as much work as possible for as little money as possible, right? You'll sit there and get 3% merit increase for years, or you could leave and go get like 20%, right? And another thing I'd say about career paths is even if your company provides career paths, which my last company did, you need to realize that eventually you're going to hit a ceiling, right? And then you have to realize when it's time to move on, right?
Yes.
If you hit a ceiling, there's nowhere else to go. You can sit there for 10 years and there's nowhere else to go, right? So if you have bigger goals or bigger aspirations, you have to move on.
That is the primary reason I ended up leaving DEW. I had a great relationship with everybody I worked with. I was in a position where I could literally do whatever I wanted to do day in, day out, be able to set my own priorities. It's a great gig from all of those standpoints. There was literally nowhere else for me to climb unless I wanted to be a CIO, and I don't want to.
And it's no fault of the company, right? I mean, some companies, some organizations are just so big, right?
Right. They were just not big enough to offer me any room to grow. So.
Yeah, my last company, they're one of my customers now. We still have a great relationship, right? And there was just nowhere else to go. They knew that, I knew that. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's all good, no bad feelings.
That's what made me step away from my first employer. Was I hit a ceiling and got told there's nowhere to go until your supervisor dies or quits. You're here, and I was like, I can't buy a house, I can't buy a new car, not gonna be able to get married on this salary, so I guess I'll find a new job. And so that's why I left. Again, same thing. I had close friends there. Actually, my buddy, his dad was dating my supervisor, and so had good connections there. Was super flexible, but all that doesn't add up to the great green dollar, right? So, yes.
Philosophical question for the room.
Mhm.
Do we feel that the turnover rate in IT is detrimental to the community? If you had a lower turnover rate, you maintain institutional knowledge, but a higher turnover rate brings in fresh perspective.
I think it's
from a
gonna-
company perspective.
When you say community, do you mean like
I mean,
the companies or the
right, yeah, this is
people?
the security of any organization, right?
Yes, it's
Oh, okay.
100% of the detriment of the security of
Yeah,
organizations.
I would agree.
I think it's to the detriment of organizations. I think it's a benefit to the community, though.
Yeah.
I think the members of the community are better for it because we've seen more. The folks that have been in one company and only seen one set of problems have a very narrow scope. The folks that have been through 15 companies, they've seen a bunch of different ways things can go wrong, and that makes them better security professionals.
Yes.
I think companies underestimate the time
It seems
and
like
resources it takes to replace them.
it seems like the managers, they look down on people that have been to many companies.
Yeah,
I don't know why they have that.
there's a disconnect between folks don't tend to recognize that being different places means you've seen lots of different things, and you've picked up skills and honestly, I've seen a lot of different kind of fire drills, right? I've been in the situations where there was equipment outages that was threatening the business. I've been in situations where there were security issues threatening the business. I've been in situations where there were perceived security issues threatening the business. And I've been in positions where there are political issues that are perceived to be a threat to the business. In terms of which one of those is the biggest crisis, really doesn't matter. Because at the end of the day, the CEO of the company thinks that's the big issue right now. And so you go work on it. But I've seen those 4 different kinds of things, and each of those were at a different company. So I would never have seen all those things unless I had moved on. And I don't think that's fully appreciated by all the managers in the industry, but that's unfair to expect them to, right? But
It depends on the size of the company too, right? 'Cause,
yeah,
I mean, I was on the Fortune 50 code. I saw a lot of shit in the same company, but it was, in vastly different areas, right?
right.
Different,
And there's
organizations.
different growing pains for a company that size, right?
yeah.
So a super small company it's easy to do inventory and patch all of those systems if you've got 100 things to patch.
Yeah.
If you're in a big enterprise with 15,000 employees, that's a lot harder thing to go and tackle to patch everything.
Yeah. It doesn't necessarily mean you're doing it correctly either. I'd say smaller companies I've worked for did better at that than Fortune 50 companies.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah.
Just because you work for a big company doesn't mean you have the best knowledge of how to do something either, I would say.
Yeah.
I also noticed one thing. I noticed that the current managers, middle managers, maybe directors, sometimes when they carry out the interviews for an engineering position, they don't bring the lead engineers in. They just talk on a high level, and then when you say something they don't know, they look it up on Google. What are the chances of anybody getting a job with those kind of managers?
So you're diving into that's kind of the same angle as if HR writes the job description, what they think they want and what's actually needed may be 2 different things. It's kind of that similar vein where the manager may not have the same experience that the engineers or the boots on the ground do to do the position. Now, argument to be made, does the manager need to have that experience or do they need to know how to manage work and that sort of thing? Maybe, maybe not. Does it help? Absolutely. I know as much as most of the people on my team about the platforms that we have. That comes from me being in those positions, managing those platforms and understanding those things. So when they come to me with a problem, I can go, yeah, I've run into that before. I know exactly what you're talking about. Or, yeah, that's just the way that platform works. I understand.
You can do the chief engineer on Star Trek thing. Like, no, just do this and this and this, and it's fixed.
But is it fair to the engineer who went to the interview and there's no lead tech or an engineer or a manager with engineering experience? It's not fair.
It's not.
It's not fair.
there's no end to poor hiring practices.
Yeah.
I would say that it depends. If it's the first interview, then maybe it should be more technical. But if you've already had the first interview with an engineering manager, and the second interview is now with the director, it could be towards what you were talking. You're looking more culture and fit into the team versus knowledge.
So, flip on that.
What is the technical? It's an engineering position. It's
As
technical.
a person who used to do interviews as a hobby,
There's a lot to unpack here.
So I read like
skill. You have to keep
60 to 70 interviews for cybersecurity positions when I was ready for Senator. Because I didn't plan on leaving there, but like I was bored. And then I used to like make fun of my own manager. It's a whole long, there's a lot of problems to unpack there. The key point is that almost every corporation that's large leads with a personality interview with a hiring manager or like a recruiter that isn't going to be part of your regular team. It most likely will be a person who never talked to that company ever again. It is almost always a screening interview for like, is this person crazy? Did they lie about their resume? Do they like meet the requirements of like, do they know what problems are? Do they know how to solve, like troubleshoot? Like a lot of companies lead with like a screening hiring manager, almost pre-interview interview. That is like part of their HR department's job before it gets to the hiring manager. And then sometimes they either do the hiring manager into the technical interview or the technical interview into the hiring manager interview. But a lot of companies do 3 interviews. So I don't know if that helps answer your question, but it is super common for your first interview to have nothing to talk about other than like, tell us a problem that you face, like tell us when you faced a problem in your life and how you overcame it. Those types of questions rather than like, how much do you know about BGP?
Yeah, I would say too. Yeah, I would say to your point, if it's going to be a personality interview, there needs to be personality questions asked. And if it's going to be a technical interview, there needs to be someone there who understands the technical and can have that conversation. So if there's the worst case scenario is the mismatch, like you're talking about, is there's somebody there who's supposed to be interviewing for personality, but they're asking technical questions and have no idea if what you're saying is true or not, or if it's actually an answer. Like that's nobody's gonna win. Like nobody.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody wins there. So it's not good for the company. It's not good for the engineer.
Right.
They might have lost a very good engineer because of a mismatch.
Right.
So,
I would say that we should always cater to the idea that everyone's being a good fit factor. As Adam said, there's no end to bad hiring practices. My company had the GSE as a requirement on associate engineers for like ever. There's only 207 people with certification. And 20 of them are SANS instructors. So like, that was the associate level preferred credential. So like, there's no, and I asked for it for 3 years. That was a recommended like credential. I was like, yo guys, this is some fucked up shit. Like, no one has that. You're insane.
We're
only
want our VMware stack managed by VCAPs.
Yeah. It's like, and you're only paying 52 grand. Like, they're not gonna do it. Like,
Yes.
I think it depends on the manager too, because I've had managers that are super technical that go after technical skill, and then I've had managers directly above me that were, more about culture and all that stuff, and they didn't care whether you had the skills or not. They were more focused on whether you could learn the skills and execute at a high level, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't necessarily have to have the skills coming into the position, but you had to be able to pick up stuff quickly and be able to execute. So I mean, it really depends on
And the last, well, I won't say the last point, but the point I would make, the last point I want to make is that
It's not true.
interviewing is as much you filtering the company as the company filtering you. So
Yeah.
if you get a bad vibe in the interview, it's totally okay to say, no, thank you for your time. Y'all have a good day. I'm gonna go get lunch.
Has anyone in the room ever walked out of an interview early, just like in the middle of the interview, like, guys, thank you very much. Okay, I figured. I should have done.
You had 17.
I've known that I wasn't going to take the job even if it was offered in the interview. I haven't gotten walked out, but
And if everybody's like, well, guys, it's been great. Thank you. I'm not interested.
I've known it wasn't going to work out.
I've had an interview where I just did not like the person I was interviewing, and I got up and walked out of it. I didn't like just stand up and leave in the middle of their sentence. I was just like, thank you for your time. I don't think I'm interested in the position, and left. And I've also had an interview where I was struggling to remember what RDP was I was hungover that day, had not slept enough. I don't know what was going on. My brain was not engaged, and the guy was asking technical questions that I knew I should know the answer to, but none of them would come to me. And I was like, dude, thank you for your time. I'm really sorry for wasting it. I'm gonna go take a nap or something.
I'm thinking about manager like cut off a virtual interview one time when the guy who was interviewing was in pajamas. Dude, if you didn't even get dressed for the interview, like it's not gonna work.
I respect that one. I'd be like,
Hired.
And I forget the guy's name. Just like Derek. He was like, Derek? And he's like, yeah, I'm Derek. He's like, it's not gonna work. Still in your pajamas, dude.
you have a personality, right?
Yeah.
It's fancy pajamas.
Depends on what the job is.
Again, it depends, right? The pajamas matter, right? Like we're talking pajamas, so
The first view you get of the candidate is like bunny slippers.
it's gonna go a couple of ways,
Right?
So,
I mean, I always had the balls of going to interview in pajamas there. Like, this guy must have been super confident.
Yeah. He's not the president of Ukraine.
so one last slide, and then there's a questions comment slide, but I think we'll probably skip that because we've done a good bit of talking. But so established job holders, right? Interview, right? If you have a job, interview. I guess might be a divisive comment, but if you're dating, if you relate this to dating, it's not like dating if you're just into one person. You can do interviews. Nobody has to know. You don't have to tell anybody that you're interviewing.
It's a great experience. Like to keep interviewing.
Yes.
Such good experience.
Yeah.
You're so comfortable because
Yeah.
if you're secure in your position, you can do things like ask for outrageous salaries.
Yeah.
And get comfortable with doing that.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, and this was a point I was going to make earlier, but I'm trying to remember the last time. I don't think I've ever gotten a job that I like really wanted, if that makes sense. Like if I was at the point where I was like ready to leave somewhere and I wanted another job, never. If you just are looking, like there's something that's interesting and you interview for it, you'll probably get an offer for whatever reason. I don't know, maybe that's just my experience, but I think it's me, the vibe I give off in the interview. I'm more nervous. I want it to work, so all that pressure builds. If I'm just interviewing because like, yeah, it looks like a good job, you might want it. I'm just like you're saying, yeah, whatever. I want X amount of dollars, and they're like, what?
Yes.
Yeah.
You can find the off switch on your anxiety before going into the interview.
Yes, you're right.
I shock at a beer before all of my interviews. But I still shock at a beer before all of my
All right.
calls.
Mackenzie, I'm not gonna condone anything that you're
I'm not gonna condemn.
not even not that either,
So,
but
interview, build those skills. That's an excellent point. Is interviewing, build those skills, do multiple interviews. You'll begin to get you'll get, if nothing else, you'll get a lay of the land, and you'll begin to understand the different questions that get asked in interviews and that sort of thing. You'll begin to build that repertoire, that dictionary, if you will. Helps to know your market value, right? So you get an interview, you get an offer, you're probably in the right spot. You begin to understand how much you are actually worth, air quotes, on the job market, right? Yeah.
I don't think you even need to get an offer. I mean, so as long as you're talking with peers, depending on the relationship you have with people, if you're comfortable talking compensation with your friends and your peers, that could be an ongoing conversation you have with your leadership of, hey, my buddy just went here, and guess what they're giving?
Yeah.
But he's a lot smarter than you are.
A day of
Yeah.
2 months later, hey man, you're having lunch with your boss. Hey, my buddy just went from here to here. Give him this. And so these are data points, and then over time, you're like, hey, I love it here. I love you, but
Yeah.
I've had that conversation. Well, maybe I'm a little different because salespeople are coin operated. And, my boss was like, well, absolutely, I want you to make more money because if you make more money, you're motivated to work harder, and then I make more money. So there's a degree of that, but I wouldn't have gotten what I've gotten over the course of my time with my current employer if I wouldn't have been laying the groundwork by having these conversations. Hey, this guy who was just like me, he came to this company the same way I did. He just went here and he's making 30% more.
Right.
And they're hiring.
Yeah.
Can be an awkward conversation though. Can go a couple of different ways. But yeah, it's a good conversation. I've had it before. It's a good conversation to have, for for sure.
Especially if you don't want to actually leave, if you really
Right.
want to.
Yeah. And, I'm not a manager, but as a manager, I'd appreciate that conversation, at least have an opportunity to hang on to someone, than they just not feeling comfortable enough to come talk to me and just leave.
Right.
Because then I got to replace them, I got to train somebody.
Yeah.
Depending on what they were doing, I might not be able to find somebody that can do all the shit they were doing. So, I think having that open communication with the employees and your manager.
You can also transition that conversation to a metrics / performance review about like, if I need to get like that image or whatever, what do I need to do to get there? Let's create that roadmap, maybe 6 months, 8 months, 12 months. Like, what are the steps? Do I need to sell more? Do I need to produce more? Do I need more tickets? All that stuff. Like, what are the metrics that we need to cross to get that promotion, to get that pay raise? So those conversations they sort of lead into each other, but they show development as an employee. I think managers should appreciate that. If they don't, then they're just bad managers. You can't fix that problem. You can only focus on yourself.
Yeah.
Or you find out there is no path to getting above this
Also that.
pay because
You got
Right.
to
You can't do it.
Road mapping is an
Now you
excellent technique. It allows the manager to be able to give you that roadmap and kind of work on it, because some things take time. A lot of times pay raises are political. They've got to get approvals. They've got to show value in you, or promise something for delivery later. All that good stuff. So,
I feel like in cybersecurity, they've become less political recently because there's a lot of open positions that people will just jump. Like, if it takes you 6 months to give me a raise, and I've got an offer over here for 20-30% more, I'm out, right?
yeah.
Dude,
Like,
the length of time it's taken to fill some of the positions on my team.
I mean, I've seen companies that have notoriously taken a long time for processes like that, shorten those on a very short notice because they found out somebody's leaving, and they're like, oh, wait. That increase we were going to get 6 months from now, I think we can move it up to like next week if you stay.
Don't be afraid to switch employers. Again, I've moved around in my career. It's advice that I've given other people. It's knowing that time to switch. At a certain point, you hit that ceiling. You hit that point where the employer or your manager is not going to be able to move you to that next step. There's just not any options left on the table. It's time to move. Culture can be another thing. If you get to a point where you don't like the culture, there's something going on, move, switch employers. There's nothing that says that you have to stay with that employer. It's just not how that works,
And
right?
your coworkers are, well, you might be friends with some of them. They will forgive you if you leave them.
Yes. Yeah.
And the ones that won't forgive you don't matter.
Right.
And another thing I'll bring up is tuition reimbursement we talked about earlier. There's some companies that pay that back, have some kind of clause that you got to stay for 3 or 5 years. At least in cyber, the next company will probably pay that off for you, right? So don't feel like you're stuck in a position because you owe the company, $7,000 for your last semester. Just bring it up to your new position. And, oh yeah, we got you.
If you, to your point, if you're the right fit for a position, mountains can get moved. I've seen things happen. I've been like, that's a possibility. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay. So if you're the right fit, you're the right fit.
Kind of like you said earlier, the worst they can say is no.
Right. That's the worst thing, right?
And if you're moving at all, ask for relocation. I got relocated from Orangeburg to Columbia. And
there you go.
They moved all my shit.
I love it.
Apartment. But if I wouldn't have asked, I wouldn't have got it. So.
Right. Usually the best way to get a pay raise / title change, your biggest pay bumps, I would assume, are going to come from switching positions. The system internally, or at least in my experience, is set up in a way that whatever salary you come in at, you get incremental raises based off of that. Even if you might see, I want to say maybe the highest I've gotten is close to 7 or 10%, somewhere in that range, right, for an internal. And that was like, you did a damn good job. So it's hard to get above that. My mark for moving is 20%, just looking at salary. Now, there's other things to be considered: time off, flexibilities, benefits, right? Going back to that point, I did my most recent switch. I had a bit of a shock because I moved from Scana, who had really, good benefits. It was like $75 a paycheck. And then moving to my next employer was like a 4 or 5-fold increase on that. And so the salary that I had negotiated, I was actually going to end up in a pay loss. And so, watch your benefits. Ask for your benefits package. That's another thing I don't have on here. Ask for the benefits package after the interview if things seem like they're going well. That's part of the consideration because that's going to come out of your paycheck, right? So again, it all goes back to the dollar signs.
That's part of total compensation: time off, Look at all that stuff. Man.
Mhm. Yep.
Like Adam says, thousands and thousands of dollars of difference.
Yeah, and another thing to ask about in interviews is outside projects, right? Like Colasec is an outside project that doesn't necessarily benefit my employer directly. I think it's a boon to my career and has definitely expanded my knowledge in the security space. So I think it's a net benefit for them if I do this, and it helps me out if they give me time out of the workday to go and like especially on the third Tuesday of the month, right? When we're getting this together, it's a hell of a lot easier to do this when I've got an employer that's willing to work with me and say, take the afternoon off and go get ready for the meeting.
Some employers have regulatory requirements that it is beneficial if they're involved in local community or nonprofits and that sort of thing. So
Yeah.
that can help as well.
Yeah.
Work with your current employer to build a career roadmap. We've talked about some of that. So, as you're in your career, talk with your supervisor. I'm at this level now. How do I get here? I want to be in management. Have that conversation with them. If they're not open to that conversation, for me, that's an indicator. That wouldn't work well with me. Maybe for other folks, it depends. But I want to see a roadmap. I want to know there's somewhere else for me to go. Keep your ceiling in mind. You will, generally speaking, if you're someone who's motivated in that manner, you will probably hit the ceiling faster than other people around you. Might just mean that it's time to move and go somewhere else. Be careful not to make unreasonable claims when negotiating with your current employer. So if you don't have a job on the hook, if you don't have something that's ready or an offer, saying that you do have an offer and being very verbose or ballsy about it, for lack of a better term, might not play in your favor. That's a chess move. Be careful. You got to know the strategy. And then be ready for your current employer to not counter offer. There's always a chance that they say, "Oh, sorry to see you go." There's a boss you may not know. You might be that guy that they're talking about, right? So, I mean, that's a chance, right? But just be ready for that. Again, just that goes back to not embellishing. Just if you're ready to make a move, if you're ready to offer, just be ready to get told no on the other side. So.
And Corey, I'd also say that be ready for your current employer to counter and something less than what the other place will be. Yep. So because a company, you might still be comfortable wanting to stay and just getting a little more money and some promises that might not come through. And, you have to be willing to accept the fact that, if you take a counter offer, it may not make things better.
Yeah.
And if you take a counter offer to get it in writing.
Yeah.
Because they might give you a counter offer, wait for you to turn down the job, and then renege on some of those positions and absolutely screw you.
Yeah.
Not speaking from personal experience.
And also, I don't know if we have any managers in the room, but know exactly what that employee does before you decide not to count on it, right? Because I've seen someone put in 13 years, bring the offer letter from the other company and say, "Hey, I've been here 13 years. I wasn't even really looking, but I got this offer. If you match it, I'll stay." And they told him everyone's replaceable. And he was replaceable, but they had to hire 3 people to replace him because they didn't know exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. Through great pain.
Yeah, so I mean, their statement is true that he was replaceable, but they hired 3 people at a higher salary than he brought an offer letter for them to stay. And so, if you're a manager, know what your employee is doing before you decide not to go.
Yeah.
The company can decisively, if you are aggressive, thinking that you can hold them at a ransom, they can just like that.
Yeah.
And replace you with you 5 because you're high risk.
Yeah. I have seen employers make very, very curious decisions with people who have lots of institutional knowledge or what have you, maybe not understanding what they're doing. You're like, even, you talk with your manager or whoever, you're on the same team as that person. You're like, no, you don't want to lose Bob. Okay. If Bob goes, we don't know. Well, don't worry about it. We'll figure out. We'll replace him. Yeah, well, you will, but it's going to hurt a lot.
Yeah. I mean, some of it's lack of awareness of what folks are doing within the organization. Some of it's politics. Sometimes it's like, wait, Greg gave notice? Okay.
Yeah.
Yay.
This kid's
Oh God, Craig had all of the databases under control and now no one does.
Yeah.
No one knows us.
Yeah.
This case I'm talking about ended up being political, right? Because they said if they gave this guy a raise, they're gonna have to give everybody else a raise. It's gonna get around. Everybody's gonna be pissed off. But they thought they were gonna hire one person to replace him, and it ended up costing a bunch of money. So in hindsight, it was probably better to give him a raise and give everybody else a little bit of a raise than to have to hire 3 people. So
It doesn't look good though if people find out, like, especially with new hires, like they negotiate, hey, I'm making, 60, 70 grand. And then the manager finds out, or a senior finds out that, hey, this person's making 60, 70 grand. I'm only making 50. I've been here for 13 years. That does not work well.
that's happening a lot recently, or I've heard that happening a lot recently, because to get cyber talent, you're having to pay more now because there's not enough people. If you want people, you got to pay extra. And there's people there that have been there 10 years, bringing in people, it's their second job ever, and they're first coming into the organization at higher than the guy that's been there 10 years. The guy that's been there 10 years get pissed off.
Yeah,
he's leaving and making more money. So, I mean, it ends up working out for him, but it's like, companies don't necessarily think about that, but they don't have a choice right now either. I mean, if you want talent, you got to pay.
I'm sure it's very difficult for HR teams right now because they do need to fill those positions, but then they're going to piss off all their current employees, and they're all going to leave and go get those new positions elsewhere. And they're just going to.
They might do it anyway.
This cycle.
To me, that's where benefits and culture come in, right? Like, at my previous employer, they had good benefits, they had a lot of vacation, it was flexible. Still wasn't enough to cover, what I thought was a big increase, right? But, that is what has kept some of the older people there versus new people coming in making more money.
Sure. So one of your best retention capabilities is the relaxed culture and the ability to take time off and all that. And short of somebody walking in and offering a 20-cent pay increase, those are not common. Yeah, right? Like, I've not been offered a 20% pay increase. Have you ever been offered one of those? That sounds like a unicorn to me. Sure, it's out there.
Switching jobs or within your job?
Within my job, for sure, never. Switching jobs, I think maybe twice. No, once ever. Like, it's not hugely common to jump that much in salary from one place to another, right? Am I off base there? Y'all been collecting 20%?
20% is not Mark. I mean, that's where I'm not saying I don't fall short of that, but I'm just saying if it's not at least a 20% bump, I generally don't entertain it.
No.
Or at least if let me say, if I don't think it's a 20% bump.
Yeah, I was 100%.
Yeah, I've done.
Jesus.
I mean, I
need to shop outside.
I have seen the 20K increase switching. Now, for context, that was from state to private. So, but I have seen the 20K bump in my time.
It must not in Columbia, right? Or this was Oracle.
That's what I'm saying. Like, all of my employers have been.
Yeah,
but it's a lot easier to get a job outside of South Carolina now for remote work. And not necessarily, like, if you get a job with a company in New York, they're not going to pay you New York salary.
Literally every one of you that said that is employed by someone outside of South Carolina.
When you had that job with the media, was that a pre or post sales job?
Post. Yeah.
It was pre-sales.
Yeah. Post.
Okay.
I mean, the biggest increase that I was ever offered was to move to LA. In day job in LA.
Definitely, man. There's not enough money in the earth.
That's sort of what I said.
But
So there is. But this job was fantastic for so many reasons. One, because it was 100% more than I was currently making at the time. So that was cool. Because it was like you're going from 60 to 185. So I printed that out and framed it. And then I hung it on my office wall. I didn't end up taking the job. And then also when like 2 months after I turned down that job offer, the company got raided by the FBI.
Wait a minute.
Their entire
Bullets dodged. All right.
We're
veering wildly into territory that I think maybe should be discussed at Part 9.
Sorry. The quick points are sometimes you can get a high-paying job that might be in a higher cost of living area, but it can still be good negotiating leverage if you ask for a raise because companies underestimate the difference of cost of living compared to what the consumer does. And then two, if I had moved out to LA and gotten a $2,800 apartment piece, which is like how much they cost.
In
I would have,
cuffs.
and then 2 months later, I lost my job because the company went under. I would have been destroyed financially for the next 10 months as I try to break that lease or get out of it or whatever. To like come like find another job somewhere else. So like, don't move across the country without some sort of like guarantee in paper or something like that, or like have them front the first 2 like months of living, or like give you relocation or something like that, you know. And then, you know, also it can be okay to explore higher cost of living areas because those job offers sometimes can lead to considerable pay bumps. That's what, yes, or if you or get a full-time remote job.
Same thing happened to me with San Diego, over 200% increase. I met with a realtor out there, went to look at houses that were equivalent to what I had in South Carolina. $200,000 house in South Carolina, 1.3 million. And in San Diego, there's like the bay on the where you can see the water is the expensive house. This was on the other side where you can't see the water, like the cheap houses, right? I was like, this is not gonna work.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, so you can always retire from there and come here. It's not working.
Yeah, this was before remote work was so big, right? Like, hey, I
Sounds
want
like
to
a guy
keep
that
that
lives
job
here
and
now.
work over here.
Retired from California.
So it is late. I do want to wrap up the presentation. I'm glad to sit around and talk, of course.
It's about talking over beer.
Yeah, thank y'all for listening. I do think there's bar none afterwards, but thank y'all. Hopefully it was a good presentation.
Good job, Corey.
Thank you, sir.
Good job, Jeff.